Welcome to House of Horrors. Some sins never fade, some souls never rest, and some curses last forever. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones. This is Black Hollow Town. Now, let's begin. In the northeastern United States, there was a small town surrounded by dense forests, Black Hollow. With a population of only a few thousand, the town had barely changed since the 1800s. Its cobblestone streets, Victorian-style houses, and narrow, tree-lined alleys made it feel like a place trapped in time. But behind Black Hollow's peaceful facade lay a dark secret. Children disappeared here, and none of them ever returned. The first recorded case was in 1923. 10-year-old Thomas Whitaker vanished while playing in his family's backyard and was never seen again. In 1937, 8-year-old Margaret Lane disappeared on her way home from school. Over the years, the number of missing children grew, yet the townspeople remained silent. They chose to forget, but the disappearances never stopped. By 2023, the legend of the missing children had become nothing more than a ghost story, a chilling tale whispered among Black Hollow's residents. Yet for Ethan Carter, this was no mere legend. Ethan, a 17-year-old high school senior, had spent his entire life in Black Hollow. Alongside his best friend, Daniel Grayson, he loved uncovering the town's buried secrets. And when Ethan heard about the missing children, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. What he didn't know was that this legend would change his life forever. Deep within the forest, just outside the town, stood an old mansion. Locals called it Crowley House. Legend had it that in the late 1800s, a man named Victor Crowley had lived there. Some said he was a sorcerer. Others believed he was something far worse. Rumors spread that Crowley kidnapped children for dark rituals. And one night, the townspeople took matters into their own hands. They set fire to the house, and they burned Victor Crowley alive. But his spirit never left. When Ethan and Daniel decided to investigate Crowley House, they had no idea what awaited them. On a cold Friday night, they grabbed their flashlights and set off toward the abandoned house. The wind whispered through the trees, creating an eerie hum that sent chills down their spines. When they finally reached the decaying mansion, its ruined state was worse than they had imagined. The wooden shutters were rotting. The front door was broken, its frame splintered. Ethan swallowed hard as he stepped inside. Something was wrong. This wasn't just an abandoned house. Something was watching them. Daniel shined his flashlight on the walls. Strange symbols had been carved into the wood marks that didn't belong to any known language. It looked ancient, sinister. In the center of the dust-covered living room was a massive wooden table, and on top of it, an old, decayed notebook. Ethan hesitated, but then reached for it. The ink was faded, the pages crumbling, but one phrase was still legible. When the door is opened, the spirits will return. Then, from upstairs, footsteps. Both boys froze. They were not alone. Ethan and Daniel exchanged nervous glances. Should they run? Or should they go upstairs? Curiosity won. Ethan lifted his flashlight and slowly climbed the creaking stairs. Daniel followed close behind. At the top of the stairs, a long, dark hallway stretched before them. All the doors were open, except for one. At the end of the hall, a single door remained closed, and from beneath it, a dim, flickering light seeped through. Ethan hesitated before placing his hand on the doorknob. Holding his breath, he slowly turned it. The door creaked open. Inside, a small child sat on the floor, facing the wall, muttering. The boy's back was turned. His small frame rocked gently as he whispered something incomprehensible. Daniel's flashlight illuminated the child's figure. Then, the child turned around and screamed. His face was gone. His eye sockets were empty, and his mouth was unnaturally stretched open in a silent, eternal scream. The walls shook violently. The doors slammed shut on their own. The symbols on the walls turned blood red. Ethan and Daniel spun around and bolted for the door. But when they reached the hallway, the stairs were gone. Ethan and Daniel had to face the terrifying truth. They were trapped inside Crowley House. The stairs had vanished. The walls seemed to shift, changing constantly like a living entity. In the background, the sound of childlike whispers echoed, filling the air with an eerie unease. Ethan clutched Daniel's arm tightly, trying to guide him out of the room. But every door they opened led them to another endless corridor. This house was alive. It was watching them, and it didn't want them to leave. At the end of the hallway, an old wooden door appeared. A rusted plaque was nailed to it. Nitrogen monoxide return. But they had no other choice. Ethan pushed the door open, and as they stepped inside, everything changed. The room was no longer part of an abandoned house. It was now a child's bedroom. The faded wallpaper was covered in bloody handprints. Toys and old dolls lay scattered across the floor, and right in the center, a young girl sat on the ground facing the wall. She was whispering something under her breath. Daniel hesitated before raising his flashlight. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. Then the girl turned her head, and they saw her empty, hollow eyes. Her skin was pale as a corpse, her mouth stretched open into an unnatural, terrifying grin. And then she screamed. The lights in the room exploded into darkness. Ethan and Daniel were swallowed by pitch-black void. In that instant, they were separated. Ethan heard Daniel's voice, but it sounded distorted, distant, unreal. "Ethan, where are you?" Ethan tried to run toward him, but the floor beneath his feet shifted. He was no longer in a room. He was inside a massive stone labyrinth. The walls moved like breathing creatures. The paths twisted and changed. Then, one of the stone walls split open, and from the darkness, a decayed, rotting face emerged. Victor Crowley. Ethan screamed as he stumbled backward. Crowley leaned in, his dead eyes staring into Ethan's soul. And then he whispered, "There is no escape." Ethan wasn't alone in the labyrinth. In the distance, the whispers of the missing children echoed in the darkness. Ethan was gasping for breath. The stone walls of the labyrinth were closing in, growing narrower with each passing second. He could still hear Daniel's voice, but the echoing whispers made it impossible to find his way. With every step he took, the silhouettes of the lost children began appearing on the walls. The whispers all repeated the same chilling words. "You opened the door. Now you all belong here." When Ethan reached out to touch the wall, he felt something moving beneath the cold stone. The wall was alive. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to move forward. But with every step he took, low moans rose from beneath the ground. Then, a massive rusted door appeared before him. The symbols carved into it were the same ones they had seen in Crowley's house, except for one difference. At the center of the door, An engraved eye was watching him. As Ethan stepped closer, the eye slowly opened, and in an instant it became a gaping black void. Then the labyrinth began to tremble. The walls cracked. The stones crumbled. Something was coming through, and the open door was waiting to pull Ethan inside. Daniel's voice grew closer. Ethan took a step back just as Daniel appeared from around the corner, sprinting toward him. "We have to close it," Daniel shouted, but it was too late. From the darkness beyond the door, a pitch-black hand shot forward and grabbed Daniel's wrist. Ethan panicked. He grabbed Daniel and pulled with all his strength, but the shadowy hand refused to let go. It was dragging Daniel into the abyss. Daniel screamed, "Don't let go of me." Ethan's mind raced. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a rusted dagger lying on the ground. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and plunged it into the black hand. A deafening scream filled the air, and then the door slammed shut. Daniel collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, but something was wrong. Ethan's eyes locked onto Daniel. Something about him felt different. Then Ethan realized the truth. Daniel's eyes, they were completely white, the same way the lost children's eyes had been. Slowly, Daniel lifted his head, and he smiled. But this smile wasn't his. "Thank you, Ethan," Daniel whispered. "You set me free." Then the lights went out, and an indescribable fear gripped Ethan's soul. The missing children of Black Hollow had returned, but they were no longer children. The end. Some stories don't end here. Some curses last forever. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and turn on notifications for more horror tales. And next time, make sure you're not alone in the dark. Good night from House of Horrors.